Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Before I get started with this, I want to wish a special welcome to Rabbi Howard Jaffe and to his wife, Irene Rosenzweig. Rabbi Jaffe is the Rabbi Emeritus of Temple Isaiah in Lexington, Massachusetts. He and Irene are year-round residents of Ice Glen Road in Stockbridge, Massachusetts. And for those of you who were here last week, when we greeted Rabbi Ellen Lewis, the last time before last week that I had seen Rabbi Ellen Lewis was at the Shabbat table of Howard and Irene. So it's all one great circle, and we're delighted you guys are here. Mazel tov on the simcha that brings you here. So, how was your week? I, for one, am a little tired. Yesterday, I hurried around the corner in the hallway upstairs and called out hello to a person I saw in my peripheral vision as I went by. Upon closer inspection, I noticed that I had given my greeting to a cardboard box leaning up against the wall. I share that with you just in case you might be feeling tired too, and to lower any expectations you might have of coherent analysis over the next 14 minutes or so. So, how was your week? The one answer that we can all give is momentous. We saw a resounding political victory by President Donald Trump and the Republican Party in states and districts across the country, a victory that to some was a shattering surprise and to others a promising move forward for our nation. To the affirmation of some and the despondency of others, the election results are a picture of who we are now as Americans. Those perspectives and more are represented within our congregation writ large and within this Shabbat community, and we are all a part of this temple family. And now Shabbat is here, and with it not only the beautiful landing place of prayer and song that Cantor Glicken and Rabbi Robbins have helped us create for each other, but the privilege I have in offering some thoughts, which I'll say up front are preliminary, personal, and pretty simple. That is in part because I've been greeting boxes this week, and in part because sometimes it's a few simple thoughts that can help us in a time of unfolding and sometimes overwhelming complexity. So, regardless of how you voted in this election, knowing this community as I do, I would propose that we share at least 4 things in common. Number 1, some measure of uncertainty about what will be next. 2, a desire to reduce the divisiveness and polarization that have riven American society. 3, a commitment to this congregational community. 4, a commitment to the Jewish values and practices that make us who we are. Now, just test those on yourself. You're not allowed to say, oh, those are all true for me, just not for, you can't do that, right? You just check with yourself, some measure of uncertainty about what will be next, desire to reduce divisiveness, commitment to temple, commitment to the Jewish values and practices that make us who we are. Does that feel like a fair hypothesis to you? Okay. I think what accompanies each of these considerations is the question of agency. Whether I am jubilant or heartbroken, what am I called to do? What am I able to do now? In the face of uncertainty, our tradition and our practice of it here at Temple give us certain tools. Meditation, yoga, breathing, study, Shabbat rest, reflection, and community. Or whatever might be the practices you already have developed. Taking a break from your news feeds, taking a walk, listening to music, reading a good book, speaking with a friend who you know will be good for you. Those don't cure all the midnight jangles, but they are a reminder that we have tools and can develop tools to cope with the anxiety of not knowing what is next or fearing the worst predictions of what is next. These may not be practices that change the world, but they do help us stay grounded in it. In the face of polarization, we have the tools of community that we have been practicing here for a long time. For some time now, we have been using them as a countercultural response to the hatred and coarseness which have become common cultural coin. And here I'm going to be really simple. If you fear that the world has swung towards hatred, practice kindness. Call someone who has been ill or who lost a loved one over the summer. If you're not sure what to do with yourself, take a shift at the food bank or your favorite agency, at the Vickery Meadow Food Pantry or our community garden. If your candidate won or lost, practice kind speech to the person in front of you, and an even greater challenge, about the person who is not in front of you. If your candidate won or lost, practice listening, even if you think the person who is devastated is overreacting, even if you think the person whose candidate won has voted against your values. If you have railed against demonization, don't practice it now. If you have tolerated it, stand against it. The Jewish tradition could not be clearer. We have the power and the obligation to model alternatives to any speech that diminishes and degrades another human being. Our countercultural move has been to make this congregation a place of kindness and relationship, and a platform for acts of kindness and relationship by our members. The love we place in our hearts now will serve us well when we need to draw on its reserves. As Rabbi Herzog Cohen said so beautifully last week, we build the ark for each other as the waters rise, whether those be the tides of national politics, the passion of the streets, or challenges in our individual lives. And part of what it means to lean into community is to lean into our community's values. It means amidst all the distractions and disagreements about what happened or what's next, we stay on mission. As I said to our staff this week, our congregation's purpose does not change with presidential administrations. Different elements of that mission may receive different energy in different contexts, but the mission is the same. In a news cycle where facts rise and fall from minute to minute, we have the benefit of group study and timeless wisdom. In the frenzy of the post-election buzz, we need the quiet space of a Shabbat breath more than ever. The immigrants who needed us last week need us this week. The hungry folks who needed us last week need us this week. The LGBTQ community who needed us last week need us this week. All the Torah's vulnerable of society. The widow and orphan, the one at the corner of our fields, the one sleeping in a borrowed blanket, and whoever they are in 2024 need us this week as they did last week. Israel needed us last week and needs us this week. The Jewish people who are vulnerable because of anti-Semitism, and thank you to Rabbi Robbins for mentioning Amsterdam, needed us then and need us now. The Jews, the families who come to our communities for a sense of Jewish joy and meaning, our Torah and Talmud and Psalm students, our mourners and our wedding couples, our new Jews and our returning Jews, the Jews who come for justice or for stillness or for silliness, the ones who sing off key and sometimes on key, we need each other now more than ever. In the face of divisiveness, we have an opportunity to double down on being a dynamic and diverse community of purpose. It's not just good medicine, it's good Judaism. And if I can, I'd like to take a minute and speak specifically to the folks who are hurting. First, I will say, as you have heard us say more than once, we are here to be of help, our clergy, our pastoral team, for folks who want to come in and share what they are feeling. That's why we show up every day. This is Shabbat Lech Lecha, I will also say. When Abraham receives the disruptive call, Lech Lecha me'artzecha mi'moladetcha u'mibeit avicha el ha'aretz asher ar'eka, go forth from your land, from your birthplace, from your father's house, to the land that I will show you. While we can interpret the verse, as Rabbi Robbins did, as a stirring call forward, the repetition of the Hebrew may means that this is primarily a call from your land, from your birthplace, from your father's house. These are as much verses of displacement as they are verses of summons. And these verses, these phrases of displacement are in fact the beginning of the journey of covenant. The journey of faith begins with leave-taking, being thrust out of the comfortable and familiar. And so if you are feeling dizzy or disoriented, you are on Abraham's path. And more challenging, Rashi's comment on the verse is that God's command of displacement is la'anatcha ulatovatcha, for Abraham's benefit and for his good. For those feeling displacement, what are the opportunities in this time? How could any of this possibly be for the good? The first answer is that unexpected disappointments, national or personal, incidental or monumental, are a lesson in humility. The truth is, we never know what's next. How can folks who are devastated and afraid use this hard lesson as an impulse to curiosity, to refrain from prejudgment, as an opportunity to learn from people we don't agree with, and to create the ground for future relationships that will deepen this community and help us fight together for Temple's values when they are challenged? Our most significant advocacy efforts as a congregation, from immigration rights to voting rights to keeping religious doctrine out of our public schools to LGBTQ rights, have been bipartisan efforts led by our congregants of different parties. To quote Rabbi Herzog Cohen again, we are all more than our yard signs. These next years are going to call upon all of us for a level of curiosity and agility that the binary nature of electoral politics inhibits to our detriment. The great 19th century Hasidic commentator, the Sfat Emet, said this about the command to Abraham to go forth. Shehadam nikra mehalech. The human being is called a walker, always having to go from one rung to another. Whoever stands still is not renewed. Regardless of how we voted, as members of this community, how can we make sure we don't stand still, either in satisfaction or despair? How can we stay curious about people whose worldview seems utterly different from our own? How can we build the relationships that will make us better? We will not and should not agree on every policy proposal. So how can we hold our convictions without being doctrinaire or disrespectful? We cannot predict what will be next, but there is a chance that some initiatives of the new administration will directly challenge our core commitments as a congregation. Our congregation and our country need us to build relationships now for the blessing of those relationships themselves and to increase the chances of our acting together in courageous conscience and collaboration for the common good. There's a famous midrash about our Torah portion. In it, the rabbis imagine Abraham wandering in a field and seeing a castle we call the Birah Doleket. The word Birah means palace, but the word Doleket is ambiguous. Some interpret Birah Doleket as a palace alight. Others see a palace engulfed in flames. In both interpretations of the image, Abraham worries that the palace does not have an owner to care for it. And God responds from the palace that God will take care. But back to Doleket. Is the palace aglow or on fire? The difference in perception exists in our community and our nation about what will be next. Is democracy aglow with promise? Or is it burning down? And I wonder, why does the tradition give us such an ambiguous symbol and ambiguous tale? Maybe because it's sometimes hard to know. What is our role with God, for God, before the palace? What is our responsibility as Jews and citizens on this journey? Is the palace aglow? Is it aflame? Is it both? And most important for our historic congregation as this journey begins, what does it mean to see God in the fire, on a sometimes dark path, as a light on the horizon? How can our values continue to guide us in a time of momentous transition for our country, whether you rue that transition or welcome it? We have the tools of community and practice, the potential for humility and curiosity, the gift of relationship, and a moral compass first bequeathed us in the covenant Abraham began with those first Lech Lecha steps. The tools, the potential, the gifts, they do not give us any easy fixes, but they can help us answer what might be the most important question of all. What is our sacred purpose at this time? Shabbat Shalom.